I was hauling a load of seed bags back from the co-op that Tuesday morning, just like I'd done every week since I hung up my fireman's helmet and took over my uncle's old soybean farm out on Miller's Bend. The air was crisp, the kind of October chill that makes you think harvest is going to be clean and easy. But as I rounded the curve on Route 17, I saw Ida haze hanging over my fields, not the soft white of morning fog, but a thick, ugly gray, curling up like it had a grudge. My gut twisted. I'd spent 30 years fighting fires, and I knew that smoke wasn't from some neighbor burning brush, it was trouble, and it was mine. By the time I hit the gravel drive, my old Chevy rattling like it felt the urgency too, I could smell a tackridge sharp like gasoline and ruin. My dog, Rusty, was whining low in the passenger seat, ears pinned back, and that's when I knew this wasn't just bad, it was personal. I didn't even park properly, just threw the truck into neutral and bolted toward the field. The sight stopped me dead. Flames tearing through my best soybean rows, the ones right up against the fancy new subdivision's fence, turning green pods into black skeletons faster than I could blink. The heat hit me like a slap, even from 30 yards out, and there, just beyond my rusted wire fence, stood Linda Harper, arms crossed, her designer scarf flapping like she was posing for a photo shoot. She wasn't yelling for help, wasn't dialing 911, just staring, cool as you please, like my livelihood going up in flames was her afternoon soap opera. "Linda," I shouted, my voice half choked by the smoke. "You call this in?" She turned, slow, like she had all the time in the world, and slid her sunglasses down her nose. "Why would I?" she said, her voice dripping with that HOA board president smugness. "This is your mess, Tom. You clean it up." My fist balled up so tight I thought my knuckles might crack, but I didn't have time to argue with her. I ran back to the truck, grabbed the old radio from the glove box habits from the fire service die. Hardan called it in. "This is Tom Wheeler. We've got a fire in the soybean field off Route 17, near the Willow Grove fence line. It's moving fast, dry crops, light wind. Send engines now." The fire crew rolled in 10 minutes later, sirens screaming, and I was already dragging my backup hose, try to keep the flames from jumping to the barn. The chief, a guy named Jake I trained back in the day, took one look at the burn line and followed the smoke trail with his binoculars. "Origin's right by that fence," he muttered, glancing at Linda's pristine lawn. "You see anything weird?" I didn't say her name, not yet, but I pointed to the scorched grass trailing right to her side of the fence. "Check that," I said. He nodded, and the crew got to work. My irrigation ditch slowed the fire some, but not enough. August had been bone dry, and those flames were hungry. When the smoke cleared, I walked the field's edge, boots crunching on ash, and found it. A melted canister, the kind you'd buy at a hardware store for a backyard fire pit, half buried in the dirt. It wasn't mine. I bagged it with a gloved hand, took photos, and handed it to Jake. His crew found more 2 other canisters, bits of charred blue fabric that looked suspiciously like Linda's scarf. And then there was the flattened grass on her side of the fence, like someone had stood there, pacing, watching the fire spread. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I had something better, me old trail cam, tucked inside a hollowed-out fence post I'd set up after someone kept dumping trash in my ditch. I called it Century, a little joke to myself, but that camera had caught everything. 1:47 a.m., a figure in a hoodie slipping through a gap in the fence, carrying a bundle, crouching low, and sparking flames that bloomed like a curse. Linda wasn't always my enemy. When she moved into Willow Grove 3 years ago, she showed up with a plate of brownies and a smile so polished it could have been on a billboard. She just joined the HOA board, all eager to make a difference, but I could tell from the start she wasn't about community, she was about control. It started small, letters about my tractor being too loud, complaints about the farm smell from my compost, even though it was sealed tight. I ignored it, My land's been zoned agricultural since my granddad's day, long before their McMansions sprouted up. But then she got bold. One day, she and two other board members, Mark, who always looked like he'd rather be fishing, and Susan, with her fake smile, showed up at my gate. "Tom," Linda said, clutching her clipboard like a shield, "we're inviting you to join our community enhancement plan. It'd really help property values if you swapped out those soybeans for something prettier, maybe some ornamental grasses." I laughed, couldn't help it. "You mean stop farming? This ain't a garden show, Linda. This is how I eat." Her smile tightened, and I saw Ida flicker in her eyes, like I'd just declared war. After that, the letters came weekly. My grass was too tall. My equipment was an eyesore. Even a stray goat that wandered near their sidewalk was a public safety issue. Then came the vandalism. Someone spray-painted dirt bag on my mailbox, dumped rotting food in my irrigation ditch. I put up Sentry after that, but the shadows on the footage were always too clever, just out of frame. Linda wasn't stupid. She knew where the obvious cameras were. What she didn't know about was Sentry's thermal lens, catching heat signatures in the dark. And it had her dead to rights. The real kicker came a month before the fire. Old Man Jenkins, a neighbor who still bought my soybeans, slipped me a copy of the HOA's meeting notes. Linda had proposed a motion to slap me with a city complaint, calling my farm a visual blight and a fire hazard. She wanted to hire a consultant to assess agricultural degradation, code for finding any loophole to shut me down. Jenkins said the meeting ended in a shouting match, not because anyone cared about me, but because Linda was burning through HOA funds like they were her personal piggy bank. I still didn't think she'd go as far as arson, though not until I saw those flames, and her standing there, watching like she'd won. The morning after the fire, I walked the field at dawn, ash sticking to my boots, the air still heavy with the smell of gasoline and loss. The damage was bad 5 rows gone, a claw-shaped burn mark that stopped just short of my equipment shed, thanks to that ditch I dug last spring. I found more evidence. Another canister, more scraps of blue fabric, and a trampled patch of grass on Linda's side, like she'd stood there savoring her work. I didn't storm her house. Instead, I pulled the footage from Sentry, backed it up on 3 drives, and called my lawyer, Sarah Coleman, a no-nonsense former prosecutor who hated bullies as much as I did. "You got this on lock?" she asked. 5 copies, I said. "Good," she replied. "Don't say a word to her. Let me handle this." By noon, the fire marshal, a guy named Carl who'd worked under me years ago, was at my gate. He took one look at the canisters, the footage, the scorched trail leading to Linda's lawn, and shook his head. "This ain't an accident, Tom. We've got accelerants, multiple ignition points, and a clear path across her property." They knocked on her door at 3 a.m., and I watched from the field, arms crossed, rusty, growling low. Linda answered in a blue robe, hair a mess, trying to play the victim, pointing at me like I'd set my own field on fire. But when Carl showed her the canister, she slipped. "That's not mine," she snapped, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "I threw out weeks ago." Carl's eyebrow went up, and I swear I saw him hide a smirk. She just tied herself to the evidence. The neighborhood buzzed after that. Porch lights flicked on, whispers spread, and suddenly nobody was watering their lawns. They were too busy watching Linda's house. Susan from the HOA board came out with a tray of cookies, looking like she'd seen a ghost, then scurried back inside. Mark, the quiet board member, caught me at the fence later. "I didn't know she'd go this far," he mumbled, staring at his shoes. "She said your runoff was poisoning our soil, that you were dodging inspections." I leaned in close. "And you believed her? You signed off on her crap, Mark. You're as guilty as she is." He flinched, muttered something about sprinklers, and walked off. I wasn't letting them off easy, not after they'd let her run wild. The civil suit hit first. Sarah filed it against Linda and the HOA for damages, harassment, and defamation. The criminal case was brewing: 2 felony arson, trespassing, property destruction, even fraud for misusing HOA funds. In court, Linda sat ramrod straight, her fancy lawyers spinning tales of neighborly misunderstandings. Sarah didn't blink. She laid out the footage, the canisters, the HOA's own meeting notes where Linda called my farm a ticking time bomb. When Mark testified, nervous as hell, he admitted Linda had pushed for fake inspections and zoning complaints, saying my soybeans cheapened the neighborhood. The judge, a woman named Clara who didn't suffer fools, wasn't buying Linda's act. She ruled in my favor, $152,000 in damages, and the HOA was barred from touching me ever again. Linda's world fell apart fast. Her house went into foreclosure, her HOA bio vanished, and the boards started cracking like dry wood. Neighbors dug up dirt emails where Linda mocked their tacky yards, receipts showing she'd funneled HOA money to her cousin for consulting. The state audited the HOA, and half the board quit, including Susan, who posted some nonsense apology online about learning moments. But the real shift came from the neighbors. One day, a kid named Ellie biked up with a jar of soybean sprouts she'd grown from my seeds. They said your farm was worthless, she said, but I wanted to see if they were wrong. Old Man Jenkins brought cookies, no judgment in them. Others followed apples, eggs, even a committee to overhaul the HOA with real transparency. They apologized, not just with words, but with hands, helping me replant, clear ash, and prep the field for winter. That spring, I planted again, row by row, the soil soft and ready, like it knew we'd both been through hell. Neighbors showed up: Jenkins with his rake, Ellie's dad with compost, even Mark, quiet but pitching in. Linda took a plea deal, 2 years in a low-security prison, probation, and a bank account that'd never recover. Her house sold to a young couple who waved when they saw me, no fence line glares. I didn't celebrate, not really. Justice isn't about cheering, it's about the quiet, like the sound of new shoots pushing through dirt. One evening, as the sun sank behind the ridge, I stood at the field's edge with Rusty, the air smelling of earth and second chances. Carl stopped by, handed me an old fire captain's badge he'd found in his garage. "Thought you might want this," he said. I nailed it to the gate post the next day, let catch the light. The field was green again, not just with soybeans, but with kids asking about seeds, families laughing as they toured the rows. It wasn't just a farm anymore. It was proof you can't burn down what's rooted deep. But here's the thing: Linda thought she was protecting her perfect little world, thought my field didn't belong next to her manicured lawns. And I get it, in a way. People cling to control when they're scared of losing it. But where's the line? When does keeping things nice turn into torching someone's life? I'm not sure there's an easy answer. And that's why I'm asking you, what would you have done in my boots? Would you have fought like I did, or walked away? Drop a comment. Tell me your story, because I'm betting some of you have faced your own Lindas, your own fires. Let's talk about it, though. Do you stand your ground when someone tries to burn it out from under you?